Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. Fall is in the air and in our sinuses, as you may or may not be able to tell in this episode. But we're excited to be here. Blake's wearing a hat.
Got a hat. Bing. If you can go ahead and drop a little ding when I flicked it like that.
I like that sound better. It was very thuddy.
It was thuddy.
So
yeah, that's funny. I've had 4 people ask me if I was sick today, and I was like, "Well, that's hurtful." But yeah, I think
you can hear it.
Yeah,
you're not. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's sick. I mean, you might be feeling a little less than great. But
cool. Well, it's good. I got like.
I mean,
I actually the last person who asked me, they're like, "You sick?" And I was like, "Is this a social experiment?" I mean, like, what are you talking about? I was like, come on, you know that social experiment where you just go up to someone and your friends go up and they ask them if they are sick today, and halfway through school they leave because they don't feel good. It's like, is this happening? Because I feel like that's either the case or I just might be sick.
Yeah, I was feeling fine, but you got me wondering. Maybe I'm not feeling so good. That's awesome. We're so glad that y'all are here for the Culture Based Podcast. We're going to talk today about process. I think this is either a leader's favorite topic or their least favorite topic. I tend to fall into this is my favorite topic because I love the process. I actually don't even like the outcome. Yeah, if what we're going for happens, great, but just get me back into the next process.
Yeah,
like I it's hard for me to even celebrate the win because I like the journey more than the destination.
I think as a visionary for me, this one is I love process. I love to develop processes.
Yeah,
I don't really like to follow processes.
There it is.
I find that about myself more as I get older.
Rule breaker.
Yep.
I like it. Before we get into this topic today, I want to remind you that we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get there. And specifically, we're going to lean in on that scalable team portion today. If you are watching on YouTube, I want to thank you for being here. I would encourage you to go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and ring the bell buttons all at the same time. Just real quick, do it now. We'll wait. Go ahead.
Pew, pew, pew. Didn't work.
Thank you so much for doing that. I saw that you did that, listener, watcher. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, we'd love for you to do that. If you're listening on any audio podcast platforms,
go ahead and pull over right now and write a review.
What if they're on a treadmill?
Pull over, get off, and write a review.
We just want a really nice review. Listen, at the end of the day, we're people too. I don't know if you saw that clip of Blake recently, but we're human. You know what I mean? And we all want ice cream and we all want kind words said about us. But really, the point of the review is so that our episodes can go further. Then that's just kind of how the algorithm works. So review them, folks. Really appreciate it. If you want to follow us on socials, we're LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can follow us at The Culture Base, BASE. Or if you'd like a free 30-minute strategy session with us to talk about how we can get this scalable team thing to be a reality, you can go to theculturebase.com. I think that's everything. Did I get it all? I think I got all the business out of the way. Cool. It's a lot. It's a lot to start these episodes. It's really the hardest part of the whole episode is starting it. Once we get into it, it's pretty easy. You just talk, how you doing? Things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that was just an idea. Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't like
get into that one. Oh, I'm good. Thanks.
But we're talking about process. We're talking. Yeah, I don't really care what you think. I don't really care how you're doing. We're just gonna talk about this anyway. Ignored. Yeah. So today we're gonna talk about processes. If the title of the episode didn't give it away, we said it 3 times because that's the way magic works. You have to say things 3 times before it happens. Someone told me that once, maybe in a Disney movie or something. I don't know. Anyway, intentions, Blake, are a lot like opinions. Everybody's got them, right? Which the beginning of that sentence could have been started a lot of different ways. But today we're going to talk about that. Intentions are like opinions. Everybody's got them. What often keeps us, though, from building these scalable teams is a misunderstanding of our processes as we grow. documenting to refining to implementing, our processes are actually worth the investment. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some energy. It might take some money away from the table a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's worth the effort. And I wanted to share the story with you just kind of as we get started into this before we really get down to the questions that I think many of you are already asking yourselves. Is I want to share just kind of an experience that I had, and why documenting these processes are so important. uh, One of the organizations that I worked for in the past handful of years, they brought me on as a communications director, which again, we already said, or maybe it was before we started recording, that process is really a communication issue,
Mm.
right? Whether it's a written communication or verbal communication, or it's handed down, generation to generation, like the old legend or folklore, right? It's really a communication issue. So I got hired as a communications director for this organization, and I came in and I had nothing to go off of. I had zero playbook whatsoever.
Mm.
And it's not like they never had a communications director before. They had a communications director before. They had no brand guidelines. They were a 20-year organization at this point, with no identity written down of who they're going to be visually represented, by their brand in the community. None of that. And it took me, Blake, well over my first year of being there
Mm.
to really get acclimated to what the role was and how to best execute it.
Yeah.
A whole year. I'm not going to tell you what my salary was because it's embarrassingly low, but just like imagine imagine paying someone a whole year's salary just to try to get caught up
Yeah.
on what you're actually doing there.
Mm. Yeah.
And even in the moments after about 6 months, 8 months, I was like, oh, I've got it. No, you don't got it, because I haven't lived through a whole year of these annual processes and flows.
Mhm. Yeah.
None of it was documented. And it was extremely difficult for me to find my footing and really make sense of it. And once I did, I was able to get going. But I mean, my whole first year was just a fact finding mission. It was
Mm.
just Indiana Jones out there with the ball rolling over me while I was trying to dodge out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet honestly that even thinking through that right here, that is a lack of process writing from someone in that current position is one of the highest costs of turnover. If you
Hmm.
think about turnover and how it happens, could have paid for you probably paid for that 2 to 3 times, like a 2 to
Yeah.
3x by not having one person start documenting processes and getting moving on it, because really process is the skeleton of branding, right? How do you ever hit a good brand standard for who you are and what people know you as if you don't have process to standardize that, and not standardize like, well, everyone's going to be the exact same. No, that's not what processes are. And I'll tell you, Dustin and I talked about this even in the beginning of before we hopped on air here, of process is one of those words that people just feel really different about, and some people love it, some people hate it, and they're going to respond to it differently. And so knowing that about people is important, because
Yeah.
um and Dustin talked about the different parts of process there. Like there is documenting and creating process, there's refining process, there's implementing process. And the people who usually love process love it on the front side, right? They love it on the come up with the greatest process, document it, refine it oh, let's take this down to an inch of its life. And then we're like, hey, everyone, I got you this great process. And we're so excited. And we throw it to them and they open it up and they're like, socks. And you're like, no,
Yeah. Processes are the
no,
socks. They are the socks.
they're socks. And
I
you're
love
like,
socks.
no, you're missing it. But these socks, they keep your feet warm. And they're like, yeah, that's what socks do, right? But we get so excited about it, and then we feel these emotional hits like that. And what ends up happening is our implementation process ends up being trash. And I think we think that if we build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
If we build it perfect, it's just gonna like touch their hand and it's gonna like go down their arm and envelop their whole body, and they're not even gonna not be able to do it. But the problem is we all want to build that one process that just we don't even it doesn't even matter about there being a scalable team or not. There's this one process that I'm going to build and it's going to go on for eternity. People will write about me because of this process and
Yeah.
history. And like we're not even writing about Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson well enough at this point. And yet I think someone's going to like give me that kind of homage later on. It's crazy. But you cannot build a scalable team unless you have scalable processes. So the idea that you're going to be able to create one thing and it's just going to stand the test of time is stupid. Okay? Any parent who says I learned how to do one thing one time as a parent and it has just proved true throughout every child, every moment, every transition, this one thing I just do it and it works. No. Okay? Not without complete attention and presence all the time. That just doesn't happen. And process is about getting the person who it's always dependent on kind of out of the scenario, right? Like it's important to have people in the process, but you don't want people being the complete dependency that process never can be passed, right? We can never pass process from one person to another. What do you have there?
Yeah, I look at processes because there are people like you're saying that are holding on to them as hard, fast rules, and you get the rule followers in the room, and they're like, "Nah," but our trapper keeper, our binder says this is what we're supposed to do next,
Yeah.
and 4 out of 5 times that person's right,
Mm-hmm.
and you do need that person. You do need that
Mm-hmm.
hard nose. Nope, that's not how we do it here. This is how we do it here. No one likes that person, but everyone needs that person. And if that person is you, God bless you for doing the hard work that no one else is
Mm-hmm.
willing to do. But there's also that other 1 out of 5 times where you have to be willing to play outside the rules just a little bit because there is no handbook for the future.
Yeah.
There's no handbook for the future. You don't know what's going to happen next. Our best plans can prepare for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And odds are that's probably the way it's going to shake out, right? Because we've seen it. We've learned from the past mistakes. We can kind of course it. But no one had COVID in their playbook. No one did.
No.
And if you tell me you did, you're lying. No one had that. And so there was a lot of pivoting that had to happen there. The way we had always done it wasn't going to work
Right.
in that moment. And so this is hard for me to say because I'm that person that loves to be like, nope, this is the process. Trust the process is one of my favorite phrases in the world. Trust the process. Even if you don't trust me, trust the process.
Yeah.
But there are times, Blake, when we know that we have to veer off of it, right?
Yeah. Well, and even this idea of refining processes seems like it's not really part of the process, but it very much so is a part of the process. And
Yeah.
to take your point of the COVID idea, like didn't it kind of feel like even the CDC when COVID hit, you're like if anybody has a plan for something like this, it's got to be the CDC, right?
Mhm.
And it felt like they were like okay. Grab leeches because that seems important now. And like you're like, all right, hold on. Even processes that don't always get hit need to be refined so we can adjust and adapt to what's going on today because our teams and technology's changing. Like even AI
Yeah.
now, it's
Mm.
changing at such a rate. How are you using that and implementing that into your processes? And
Yeah.
if you're like, well, I'm just not going to because I don't want to and I don't trust it, like that's okay, fine. You can do whatever you want
That's a
with your
move.
business, but understand that it's going to continue to change whether you do or not. So, and I think when you're thinking about scaling your team or helping someone rise up to where your processes are because that's what it is. If you want this implemented, there's two parts to it. One, can your organization sustain this type of process? Right?
Mm.
Like you can write into your process like as an electrician, I can write in we always use gold instead of copper for our conductor. Can we sustain that? Heck no. We can't sustain that cuz I'm not buying gold for a conductor for electricity, okay? But the other side is is my team able to manage and walk through this process? And there is a time where you've got to lead your organization in a scalable way and your team in a scalable way, where it's almost like you think of it like like the process of how babies grow into adult children and how you feed them, right? And like in the beginning, you're mashing up all the food, you're buying baby food, you're getting just this thin substance so that you can feed this child, right? And you don't hand them a spoon and say good luck. And I know there's like a milk phase too, but I'm starting a little different here. Okay. And then you're like, here's a spoon, good luck. It doesn't turn out well, right? Like those are our best photos on our phone, but they don't feed the kid. So now you got to feed them. And then the next stage is okay, now they're eating more solids. I got to make sure they don't choke. There's that occasional moment, but I'm cutting up all their food tiny enough because if I hand them a knife, they're going to kill themselves. And then now they're going on to the next stage. And now I'm watching what they eat. I got to make sure, okay, they're eating more, but you better eat your greens because you got to grow up big and healthy, and drink your milk because your bones aren't going to be strong otherwise, which I don't know if that's true. But, we're going through these processes and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's feeding the kid and it's making sure they're getting the right stuff. And it changes as time goes on, but so does our company and so does our team as they come into things. And as someone enters your organization and has never experienced your kind of process, like I know a lot of people are like, well, sink or swim. And they're like, well, I can just go swim somewhere else. Like
Mhm. I don't have to
there's
sink
that
here.
aspect. Yeah, I don't have to sink. I can just not stay here.
Yeah.
And there has to be an aspect of helping people grow into these processes too, and not just like, well, this is the way we've always done it. That doesn't fly anymore.
No, it doesn't. So let's get practical a little bit about these. I think we've painted pretty good picture about why processes are important, Blake. But when do we start building these processes, or as some companies like to call them playbooks?
Mm-hmm.
When do we start building these playbooks?
I immediately, like, I don't care what stage you're in. If you're in the entrepreneurial starting something up, as you build like your organizational chart, I would almost encourage you as you're building this out and you're building systems, you're figuring out those processes that fall under different hats, right? Like head
Mhm.
of sales, head of ops, head of finance admin. And you might have the one hat. This is where I wore it today, apparently. You wear the one hat, you might have a bunch of hats on, but you're building out that position and what it looks like in this area or this division. And as you're building that out, you're getting it to where you can step away and hand someone that thing. So when is the best time to do it? Right away. Right away. And it'll look different. All of our processes, I mean, in the years that we've been around, we've probably had 7 different platforms for how we even manage our processes. We've
Mhm.
had Excel sheets. Then we moved to this in order to handle it. And then we were like, hey, how is this even getting in front of people? So we had to get different communication platforms to make sure we conveyed our processes the correct way. And so it will continue to change. But if you have the mindset that I'll do it when I get bigger, I'll tell you that's going to feel like a mountain.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're already in that place where you're like, man, this thing is already, the ball's rolling down a hill. I don't know what I'm going to do. Just pick one thing. Pick
Yeah.
one thing, process it out, even if you spend an entire year on that one, it's a year well worth it. And
Yeah.
then the next year, grab another thing. And
Hmm.
the more you can do this and you can update your processes, it won't feel like near the mountain that it is.
Yeah. Totally agreed. We talked about kind of how these scalable teams also involve scalable processes.
Mhm.
So Blake, what does that look like on a regular daily, weekly in the grind? Is this a one and done? Like if I'm going to spend a year really getting this process documented, is it okay? It's in the vault and I never have to worry about it again. And when do I come back to it and refine it and update it, or do I just leave it for generations to come to be able to kind of go find and translate and decipher what it is that we said many years ago?
Yeah. If this process is done right, and it's like it ought to be living in everyday tasks and everyday movements that your team is doing. if all you do is create, hey, this is what we do, and we're going to put it in a book and put it on the bookshelf, all you're doing is creating a novel. You're not really creating actionable
Hmm.
movements here. And so
A
at the end of the,
memoir.
yeah, it's just a memoir at that point. This is how we did it in 2000. This is how we did it in 2003. But these things need to be living documents that are available for everyone who uses or engages in this process to see. And as you're doing things, you should be constantly updating these. This is why the whole refining process is really shouldn't be that hard, because it'll be caught in the moments where doesn't the process needs to grow, right?
Hmm.
So we've had a process for following our sales numbers, for example, and how we look at certain things. As we've grown, those numbers that are important to us are different numbers, and so
Yeah.
what we have to catch and look at has to adjust to that. Well, if we don't adjust that in our writing or in our memoir or whatever, then all we're doing is getting a past tense look at what we did years ago. If we're
Yeah.
constantly adjusting it and then creating ways to have accountability in that process, it's going to keep living on. If there's no accountability to a process, it's just going to get dust. If you put accountability alongside your processes and you're constantly adjusting them, and you give someone, this is a big one, someone has to own the process. Okay. The process has to have an author, if you will. And if the author does not constantly update and give revised editions, then it doesn't. It just, it's old. It's old news.
Yeah. I love it. So I think there's a couple of parts to these processes that we need to cover before we end our time today, and that's what should be in the process. And it's going to sound like a little bit of a broken record, but I think we all know that we need to start with why the process exists. Like, I'm not going to get someone buys me a Lego set, which please do. I love Lego. But if you give me the Lego set, like the very first page of the instruction manual isn't, all right, step one, find this little brick with the six dots on top. The
Yeah.
first page of the instruction manual shows you what the end product is.
Yes. Oh,
It shows you why you're doing what you're doing.
mm,
And then you get excited about it. And then you're like, yes, let's go build this thing.
mm,
Uh, if you're like me and you're like, you want that $200 DeLorean Lego set from Back to the Future, like, let's go build this DeLorean. It's
yeah.
going to be amazing. It's 4,000 pieces or whatever it is. But you have to start with that right up front.
Yeah.
You have to start with why. So we know that, but then we also need to start with how, and or we need to finish up with how and what. Can you talk a little bit about that, Blake?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we're building out processes, we have to have a zoom in, zoom out method, because we've learned that we will come up with these processes, throw them into play, and we're like, why isn't everyone doing this? People aren't going to change behavior until they understand why they're changing behavior. So if you can help them understand the behavior change and what it does big picture, just like you said, you're showing the end product of that Legos, that's going to help a lot.
Yep.
The next thing I'd say about it is mind how many steps a process takes. Okay. When you make something like, hey, it's just an easy 2,312 steps and you've got this process down, that's way too much. And you're making it way too big and intangible almost.
Yeah.
This is where like Legos does a really good job of this. We're going to stay with this metaphor.
I
They do
love
a
it.
great job of building phases for
Hmm.
what's going to go on. They take
Yeah.
these little tasks, create little assemblies, and then they put them on later
Yes.
on.
I
And
love
so
it.
when you can make process that way and say, hey, here's our meta process for sales, but it breaks into all these other little processes of pieces that we're going to bring together
Mhm.
to show what our sales really look like. But if you're like, oh, here's our sales process, and it's just so whatever, but you can do that as a high level look, but don't make that a
Yeah.
let's make it really granular the whole way. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to use that as a task that they're going to take and to do it the correct way and the branded way that your company requires or expects it done. They're just going to see this massive process and get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I've been putting together a Lego set and I'm like, "What is it having me build right now?" I'm building a car and this thing looks like, a baseball
Yeah.
bat. Like, I don't know what it is that I'm putting together right now. And then you turn the page and you're like, "Oh."
stop.
This part it goes to this part. I
Yeah.
get it now. Okay. Okay. I got it. So, yeah, so, these little micro processes,
Mhm.
are super important because that's where the ground level work is, and
Yeah.
I would wrap up this by saying too that if you can hand this playbook or this process over to someone that has no idea anything about your department. You just walk across the campus, walk across the hall, walk across the office, and just hand it to HR and say, "Hey, this is our sales process. Does this make sense to you at all?"
Mhm.
Like that's a great way to know that you have a really solid process
Mhm.
because if they look at it and they're like, I don't know what this word means, you're using a lot of internal language. I don't get it. There's no explanation as to what this is. There's no roadmap. There's no key. Like there's no glossary. Like I don't know what
Yeah.
it is you're talking about here. Then there's a real opportunity there for you to refine that even more and make it better. And that would be something that I honestly, you're talking about this refining and implementing process. I honestly would just, if you use like a software tool like an Asana or whatever you use, and just a regular reminder, just say, hey, it's that time of the year again where we're going to hand our sales process to our HR team, and we're going to hand our operations process to our VP team, and we're going to just start handing each other processes for them to look over it and go, does this make sense to you at all? Does it still make sense to you at all? I know it might have last year when we asked you the same question, but does it still make sense? Like those are super important things.
Yeah. And there really are, I don't want to make sound like we got two sets of books here and we're cooking the book. And I'm not saying that, but there really are two process books. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing which one your team needs at the right time is important.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a training process book that gets really granular that you're using
It's 101.
videos. What's that?
It's 101.
Yep, exactly. And it's using videos, it's giving step by step on everything. That's really I learned the hard way is we used and I thought it was a great platform. It was called Sweet Process, like SWEET process. And
Sweet.
and you could assign tasks based off of your process and it showed a visual of where you were going. And so it was really neat and I loved it, but when you make it so deep, there's a lot of stuff that just becomes noise once you understand the nuance and flow of a process.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there almost needs to be this second process book expectation that is really simplified and scaled down. Like this is probably how you would just draw your process out on a piece of paper and hand to someone who understood the process already.
Yeah.
There needs to be that, but there also needs to be this training and developing side that gets into a lot of the things that real nuanced people in that position forget that is even a thing because they've just done it over and over. And so if you're like, how do I build a scalable thing? Well, you're going to have to keep training people and developing people. So you really need to keep both kind of going at the same time. But when you adjust one, just adjust the other. Okay. And YouTube is a great resource to be able to create quick free videos and like just put links right into your process of like, hey, if you don't know how to do this, watch this video. Hey, if you don't
Yeah.
know how to follow this part, do this and watch this video or listen to
Yeah.
this podcast on why we're even doing this thing.
I've actually been using Loom quite a bit for
Oh,
some of
Loom's
these
great.
things. I'm working with a creative agency, and I've been encouraging them to document their processes of this particular brand, a really big client of theirs, and this particular client likes a certain coloring and likes a certain tone and look and feel and cut rate and all these different things, right? And so I just encouraged them to make a Loom, and it literally took them 5 minutes to put
Mm,
together a quick Loom video where you could see their screen and you could see their face. Super free, super easy to do, and then now boom, it's documented. Like
yeah,
I don't want people to think that this process has to be so antiquated where we have to have these binders of and reams of paper and typewriters. Like it's 2023. Like use what we have in front of us. Like if you read Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, he talks about using video as a way to document these processes.
yeah,
It's convenient, it's out there, it's easy. It doesn't have to be something where it's all bullet pointed out, because if you do the video and you're like, but I also need a written version, going back to Blake's point, AI's in the house,
boom,
and
boom, boom.
it can do it for you.
Let's
Can
go.
do it for you. So processes are a lot easier than you think. They seem really daunting and they seem like a really big task, but you can't build a scalable team without a scalable process. So
Amen.
Next time, we're going to talk to y'all about why people quit. Next Tuesday, when this comes out, is Halloween. So we're going to talk about this scary topic.
Spooky.
Spooky of why people quit. And that's, obviously at the culture base, it's super important to us as we're helping you build these scalable teams. If you're constantly losing people, you can't do that. So we're gonna get into the trenches a little bit and talk about those things. Want to remind you to check out theculturebase.com for a free 30-minute strategy session with us on any of these topics that we're talking about. Encourage you, if you're just now joining the podcast, go back and listen to our first handful of episodes. This is episode 16, so we're not too deep in it yet. You can still catch up. There's still time to go back and listen or watch some of these on YouTube. So super thankful for y'all joining us today. We'll talk to you next time on the Culture Based Podcast.